Hello and good morning for some of you, good afternoon for the rest. I am on the East Coast this week, so I am doing some family life changing things. So I thought this would be a great time to have a conversation about the three phases, the three life phases that women go through. And they're very distinct phases. And we don't talk about them a lot. And I don't think we support each other as well as we could, or we don't get the support that we really need during each of these phases until we fully appreciate and understand them. And there are times in your life that help to exemplify more of each of these stages than others. But for women, very specifically, there are three points in time. There is what they call the maiden phase, which is the prepubescent, the early times for us. Most of us are about somewhere between 10 and 14 when we actually start the second phase, our period phase. But before that, this is more of this innocent time. This is more of this learning about ourselves. This is more of the purity side of who we are, right? It's the it's the just having fun and just being stage. The second phase is what they consider the mother stage. This is essentially the stage, even for those of us who choose to or just don't have children for whatever reason. This is still considered the mother stage. This is the point in time where we are in that bleeding stage, we are in that fertile stage. But this is where we start really kind of coming into our own as women, right? And that changeover from that maiden stage over into what they consider to be this mother stage can be a really amazing time, but for a lot of us it isn't. We don't get the support or the encouragement that we need during this time, and we struggle through that transition. And it can happen for some of us really quickly. I know for me it happened very quickly. And sometimes we're confused and we don't understand what's really going on with our bodies, but not just our physical body, but our emotional bodies, right? A lot is changing. We start to see the world very differently at this point. Our bodies are doing things that are very different. We feel very different. We start having emotions, and frequencies and energy running through us that we weren't familiar with before. We start to really see a separation between us, and other people. We start to kind of step into who we are, or we pull back. So the mother phase is a very interesting point. This is when we really start to see ourselves and how we relate to others and how we relate to ourselves. And this is also the point where uh, Anthony and I both teach in a functional medicine certification program, and I teach um, the epigenetics and the trauma healing component to that program. And most of the people that are being taught in that program are more conventional medical professionals. So you see a lot of MDs and DOs and nurse practitioners and physicians assistants and even chiropractors in that program. But you see more of the traditional conventional doctors and practitioners in that program. And it's interesting because it's a very different energy teaching to more conventional thought process practitioners than it is to more natural thought process practitioners. And Anthony teaches the nutrition component. And we are the only two in the entire faculty that are not doctors. And they wanted us to be part of the program because we see a lot of healing, and where conventional medicine doesn't really think about the healing component to medicine. They think more about the management component. How do we manage the symptoms? How do we control the symptom? How do we squash the symptom? And they typically look outside of the body to do that. They look at pharmaceuticals, they look at ways to kind of force the body to do what they want it to do. Where natural medicine tends to lean the other direction, where it looks at the idea of how is the body naturally working and how does nature typically work? Can we work alongside of or with the body and how it works within nature? And there's a need for both the conventional and the natural component. So functional medicine is supposed to be this happy little bridge in between. So I was teaching in one of the classes one day, and one of the doctors had asked a question. We were talking about this more of this middle stage, this the bleeding stage for women, and or the fertility stage. And I made a comment, it wasn't really in the program, but we were talking about epigenetics. And I said, well, there's a reason that this phase for women, the fertile phase for women, is called, we follow the moon cycle. We actually follow the patterning of the bleeding cycle. And one of the female doctors jumped in and she said, "Are you suggesting that all women used to be fertile at the same time?" And I said, "I'm not suggesting it, I'm saying that once upon a time when we were much more connected to the earth, we were much less disconnected because of technology and buildings the way that we have them now and the cement, and we're not in nature the way that we used to be once upon a time. We actually used to follow the moon cycle much more effectively. So during this middle section, this mother time phase, this is when, if you're really paying attention and you are really connected and you're not on replacement hormones or hormone therapy or the pill, or you're not been forced into menopause for any reason, and you're in this stage, typically somewhere around the age of like 12-ish up to about 50-ish is when we're in this stage. And you actually will follow the moon cycle. So the full moon is more of that very fertile time. That's when we're ovulating. And the new moon is typically when bleeding begins, when your cycle begins for that particular month. And you really saw that women were really more in this stage together in a way that we're not the same way we used to be, right? Because we are forcing our bodies to try to do what we want it to do. And the pill is one of those things that we lean into to do that. And again, I'm not making comments and not making judgments. I'm just saying, if we're stepping away and we're trying to force our bodies to do something the way we want it to, and we're not naturally moving into that. So the doctor, she stepped up and said, "Are you suggesting we all used to be fertile at the same time?" And I said, "I'm not suggesting it, I'm saying it." And we've kind of gotten away from that stage, and we've gotten away from our natural instincts. We've gotten away from the rhythm that we find ourselves in this part of our lives. So you'll see a lot of women kind of struggling a little bit more during this phase of life, this mother phase, because we aren't allowing ourselves or aren't able to connect naturally the way that we used to with nature. So we do struggle a lot more than we've ever seen before. We're seeing a lot more fertility issues, a lot more women really struggling to get pregnant, a lot more women just struggling in general. Women up to the age of, so 80% of women up to the age of 50 typically are seeing fibroid issues. So 80% of women typically have a fibroid issue by the time they're 50. And these are not conversations that we're really having. And there's not a lot of conversation about why. But if you look at how disconnected we've become from who we really are and who we are, our identities, and all of those pieces, and being disconnected from nature, that's when we're really going to see a lot of struggling during this mother phase. And this is where women used to really bond together in a very different way than we do now. There's When we see a group of women who can really bond and support each other and hold space for each other, especially in this phase, you tend to see those women succeeding on more levels more effectively when there isn't that conflict. But I think societally, we still see a lot of conflict for women with each other because we still don't know how to really support each other, right? In that same way. But let me talk about the third phase. I'm going to come back to all three of them. So the third phase, and I, I just like the terminology for phase three, but I'll tell you what it is. The third phase, which I am slowly and sometimes feeling quickly moving into, is what they consider the crone phase, which not usually giving you the best visual, right? But it's considered the crone phase. This can be the most amazing phase. And this again is a transition. So now we're in this post bleeding phase, right? The post fertility phase. But this is when women can really step into who they are and step into their full brilliance. This is where you see the wise wisdom of women coming through. And when we can support each other and hold space for each other in this phase, the most beautiful things can happen. Right. And this is what I know I'm stepping into right now. A lot of our clients typically are stepping into this is when you're taking in that perimenopausal kind of menopausal stage, and you're stepping into a whole nother level of who you are. A lot of women are learning to figure out who they are as mothers of adult children, women who have chosen not to have children or don't have children of their own. They're stepping into more of this maternal beyond phase where you're learning how to support other people in your life in a whole different way than you did before. And you're learning how to support yourself emotionally, mentally, and physically in a whole different way. This is the phase where women step into and really stand up for who they really are. Their bodies are shifting, their emotions are shifting, their hormones are shifting, and this can be a really brilliant phase. But we kind of throw women away once they're no longer fertile. I had a surgeon. I had a back issue, and I had a surgeon. They wanted to do some X-rays and some ultrasounds to see where this little back issue was coming from. And in the interim, they discovered that I had a fibroid, and I didn't know that. No one showed me or said anything to me about these scans that they had found this fibroid. And this surgeon walked into my room and said, "We're prepping you for a full hysterectomy." And I said, "Why?" I'm here because of a lower back pain issue. And he said, "Oh, well, we found a mass." Now, he didn't explain to me that it was a fibroid. He just said, "It's a mass." And at the time, now this happened almost a year ago, he said, "And you're almost 50, and you don't need those parts anymore. So we should take them out." And I said, "Okay, first of all, I'm not open to that. Second of all, is this going to help with my back pain?" And he said, "I don't know if it's going to help with your back pain, but you don't need those parts anymore." And it was one of those moments where I just went, whoa. Like he was so sure there was no need for this. And I was so like, wait a minute. I'm still a person. I'm not a car. And what do you mean I don't need those parts anymore? Even if those parts aren't working to keep me fertile the way they used to be, and I'm not having children, that doesn't mean I don't need those parts. And it's a very interesting dynamic when you start getting talked to like you're a car. And I think a lot of times we start thinking of ourselves that way. And again, in no way am I saying if you've chosen or have had to have a hysterectomy or pieces removed, so to speak, that you've done something wrong. But I think we need to start opening ourselves up more to understand just because we're not fertile, that doesn't mean that our bodies are not worth anything anymore, that we're not worth so many brilliant moments that are to come, right? And we have to start taking a deep breath and looking at ourselves as beautiful, amazing beings. So we go through these three phases, right? We move from the maiden phase, which is more of this pure phase, but that's where a lot of our traumas actually show up in this maiden phase because we don't know what is right or wrong or scary or not, except for what our instincts are. And if we grow up in a household where it's normal to have chaos, it's normal to have alcoholism, it's normal to have abuse, but we don't know that it's not, right? This is where some of our traumas really root in. And then during the mother stage, we shift over, the emotions can really start holding on and locking down. And this is where we reinforce some of our traumas without realizing it. But we can have these brilliant moments where if we support each other as women and we learn how to step into who we really are, especially in this phase, the second phase, we can really grow and learn and shift and heal and then further heal as we step into more of what, again, they call the crone stage. This is the wise, wisdom, brilliant phase where we can fully step into who we are, step into the identity of our true souls. And what this is so important about when it comes to healing is when you can fully embrace each of these stages and you can support other women as they are stepping into each of their stages, and you're open to the idea that you're learning through each of the stages for yourself and for other people in your lives, we can heal in the most beautiful, amazing ways. And a lot of our symptoms are showing us that there's times, there's points, there's moments in each of these phases that we can learn from and grow from, because everything that's happening is happening for us to learn how to find the strength to move to this next level, this next phase. So, what I highly encourage all of you is trying to take a deep breath and ask yourself, well, which phase am I in right now? Am I open to moving into the next phase and learning and seeing the growth of it? Or am I trying to avoid it? How many of us, and you watch this even in just social media, you watch this on TV, we watch this in movies, how many of the women, especially, but we're seeing it with the men too, are trying to avoid the next phase, avoid the next stage. We don't want to look like we've moved into the next phase. And are we holding people back from really stepping into who they are because we're telling them, well, if you're moving into the crone phase, then you're worthless. You're not worth anything anymore. You're not fertile, so you're not part of society anymore. That's nonsense. But do we have those things, thoughts running through our own selves? You know? And when we can embrace it and step into it, there's a healing that happens at another level that you don't get the opportunity to really feel until you've stepped into that phase. So I want you to just take some time this week and just contemplate the ideas of this maiden phase and what brilliant things happen for you during your maiden phase, and perhaps maybe what some of the moments of trauma or perceived trauma occurred for you during that maiden phase. And then during this middle phase, this mother phase, how are you stepping through in this fertility stage? But what does that mean for you, especially if you didn't step forward or you weren't moving forward with having children during this stage? And if you did, what does that mean for you too? Because mother takes on a whole nother definition, right? And how do you support not only yourself, but you support other women and hold space for them? And then moving into more of this crone phase, this wise woman phase. How are you embracing that if you're moving towards it or you've already moved into it? Are you stepping into it? And that's part of your healing. That's part of your journey. That's part of your brilliance as you go through. So I want you to start looking at these three phases and look at it from an emotional standpoint, a spiritual standpoint, mental standpoint, and a physical standpoint. And are you embracing it or are you resisting it? Because within the resistance is an opportunity for you to have a healing moment too. So deep breath. I know this is resonating for some of you. I know it's hitting in certain places for many of you. And, really stepping into whatever phase you're in right now, knowing that that's there for you for a reason, and you can choose to start embracing it and flowing with it, or you can see yourself resisting it and trying to fight it. So deep breath. If you want to have more of these conversations, I'm talking a lot these days about burnout, which you see a lot for women in each of these phases, especially in the mother stage, especially as we're moving into more of that crone stage. If you're really struggling with that, the resilience that you may have inherently might be challenged in a way that you can't activate it. So I recently came up with, and I came up with a quiz on seeing where you are in your resilience and your burnout. So you can go to nourish123.com and take that quiz. It's fairly quick. And then there's a video that pops up after it, depending on where you end up in the quiz, that will help you also support you and see where some of the other pitfalls are for you and what you can do to avoid falling into these really common pitfalls. If you're at a point where you're like, hey, I really want to have a conversation with you about where I am in my healing process, and maybe I might want to start working with you, we can have a conversation about what that might look like and really see where some of your biggest challenges are. And if it's the right conversation to have, we will have it. That maybe it would be right to start working with us as a private client. We also work with people in corporate as well, in corporate wellness programs as well. So you can go to nourish123.com/heal for that too. I want you guys to take a deep breath, see which phase you're in right now, and are you embracing it? Or are you in a resistance space with it? And maybe you could learn a little bit more to help support you and your healing.